Guy systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.
My apologies. I'm TC, and this is Minnesota Black Robe Regiment Podcast, MBRR. And tonight is TC and Friends Monday Night Musings. I'm going to be bringing Jay on, the Turbine Guy. We're going to be having a conversation about government corruption, if you will. And so I would encourage you to stick around for that. I'm going to go through. Everybody's having tech issues tonight, and I'm just going to blame the weather. Whatever the case might be as far as what causes the weather issues. Yeah, but anyway, if you are tuning in for the very first time and you never watched my stuff, please feel free to subscribe to the channel. In fact, I would encourage you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, hit the bell icon, make sure that you are getting notifications for when my stuff goes live. And if at any point you feel like you'd just like to toss a super chat my way or whatnot, feel free to do that. Or better yet, you can head in and do a membership, because memberships are great. We love memberships here, and they are fun. They are fun. I got a video that I'm going to be putting up on for the members only that I think you guys are going to enjoy. It's a conversation that I had a while back with a guy who was getting ready to sell everything and run off and join the Ukrainian army. Say what you want, but it's, oh, heavens to Betsy. It's a great conversation. I'm going to put it up in a few parts, and that'll be for members only. And then I might just clip out pieces of it to put up to tease people and say, hey, if you want to see this whole conversation, you head over to the members side. But anyway, thanks for stopping in and getting ready to listen to this conversation I'm going to have with Jay. Jay is an interesting character. He has been on the city council of the city of Orono in Minnesota, and he's also run afoul of the city of Orono. And one of the things that he has done by running afoul of them has really kind of awakened people in his area to what the local state, the local government can and can't do. And we're going to talk pretty much exclusively about that and that kind of corruption. And we're gonna have Jay give some background to his story, and we're gonna link some stuff, and not forced linkage, but we're gonna link some things. And you guys are gonna start to, if you don't already, you guys are gonna start to understand why I talk so much about corruption and tyranny with the state, what you guys often will hear people refer to as the government. You're going to start to understand this. And I know I clarify this a lot in my content because a lot of my recent followers, members, and whatnot on the channel, subscribers, have been following me because of my work with the auditing community, with the observing community. And that all links to this. It all ties in. The reason that these things are all so important is we're having these fights. First Amendment auditors, Second Amendment auditors, they're all having these fights, not because the regime in Washington, D.C. is evil, and it is, Republican or Democrat. The uniparty, the duopoly is evil. But we're not having these problems at the local level because of the evil in Washington, D.C. We're not having these problems at the local level because of the evil in your state capital. We're having these problems at the local level because people at the local level have power, and they love their power. And you have to be a person of of a great caliber of character and ethics and integrity to not allow that power to corrupt you, to not allow that power to go straight to your thick skull and ruin you. And that's why First Amendment auditors, guys like Tav, the angry vet, guys like Flex Your Freedoms and BCNN and so many of the others. That's why they're having problems. That's why Jeff Gray from Honor Your Oath. That's why Amagatsett Press, which really is a travel channel, has so many problems. And we see it over and over and over again with Long Island audits. If you watch Lackluster points these things out. If you watch Recognizing Our Rights, he points these things out. Audit the Audit. He points, like, Audit the Audit goes through and grades the auditors or the interactors and law enforcement. And almost always, when Audit the Audit does what he does, he ends up pointing out the corruption on this part of the state, on the part of government. And all of this, none of it's in a vacuum. First Amendment auditors aren't discovering something that's just impacting First Amendment auditors. Second Amendment auditors aren't just discovering something that's only impacting them. They're discovering something that's been impacting all of us for a terribly long time. And Jay is not a First Amendment auditor. He's not a Second Amendment auditor. He's just a guy who likes the idea of people being able to get off grid and be energy independent. And the regime at the local level, they can't have that either. And so this is an incredibly important story for all of us. And I want you guys to share this out and to listen in and tell your friends, like, hey, guys, I know that we're really jonesing for these sexy stories about First Amendment auditors standing up to the cops and about Second Amendment auditors standing up to the cops. You know, be a James Madison audits, be James Freeman, be, Jeff Gray, be Sean Reyes, be Tav, but we should also be Jay Nygaards. And we are ready to go. Jace, well, he's got his camera working, but I don't know if it's facing the right way. So without any further ado, and after a lot of ado, we're going to bring him in. Jay, thank you. Your camera is off, but it's not pointing in the right direction. Or something's...
That's not exactly true. What happened was I smashed my screen and I went and replaced it myself, and I haven't used the camera since, so here we are.
Well, I'm told I have a face. I'm told I have a face for radio, and then the radio people tell me I have a voice for nothing. So,
I'm sorry to everybody that I didn't quite repair everything right. I guess I got to take it apart and look one more time and get it plugged in.
So that's, it's apropos of nothing, but is just kind of a commentary on this nature of technology, isn't it?
Yep, it sure is.
All right. So Jay, give us a little bit of background, since we got a late start to this tonight for tech reasons on my end and your end, obviously.
Yep.
Give us a little bit of background of who you are, where you started philosophically, and without going into detail of your story, kind of your involvement with local government there before things went south.
Sure. I've always been what I'd call is just a good guy trying to get through life. And a large part of that has been, doing good and helping others and whatever as times have come and gone. And at one point, after serving my country in the Navy and then getting back out and working and starting college, I decided when I got married that we moved out here to Orono, I'd like to participate in local government. And I ended up with myself getting on the planning commission. And then eventually, the next election cycle, I kicked ass. And I think I got 1,800 votes. The next closest got like 12 or 1,300. And I ended up on my city council. Now the reason that happened was because I had it in myself that if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it right. So for 8 different weekends, I walked around the community
Well,
knocking on doors.
give people an idea of the population of the city of Orono.
At that point, is about 76 or 7,800. It's
Right.
like 8,200 now. So
And
I
and
knocked
it
on about
and it falls within the within kind of the sphere of the Twin Cities, correct?
Yeah, well, we are on Lake Minnetonka. We have a third of the lake shore, Lake Minnetonka. It's a large kind of bedroom community that the previous administrations, when they rerouted Highway 12 when it got rebuilt, didn't want any exits in Long Lake or Orono, so people would all drive by. They wanted to maintain the rural nature of this community, and it's really interesting because there's 12 different communities, I believe, around Lake Minnetonka, Orono having the most lakeshore. And it's kind of incumbent on Orono to protect the water quality of lakeshore given its size. So that was a big impetus behind it all.
So you are metro-ish.
I grew up in Orono Long Lake. I graduated Orono. After a few short months at North Dakota State, I ended up in the Navy. Then when I came back, I went to Minneapolis Community College and graduated the University of Minnesota with a mechanical engineering degree.
And so
And hold on. And while I was in the Navy, I was a Navy nuclear power machinist mate. So it seems I don't do anything the easy way.
so you were you went to MPTU.
Yes, I did. Well, yes. I was in Orlando for 6 months, and then I ended up in Idaho for another 6 months training.
Working on the mock-ups.
Yes, and it's really interesting because I recently went out to Idaho for a client to help commission a system, off-grid Enphase system. And on the way back, we're driving through Idaho, and I had to stop in the middle of the desert because I was right exactly where we took the hour-and-a-half bus ride out every day to get to the training unit. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm actually back here.
Yeah, that's not even there anymore, is it?
Oh, it sure is. There's all
Oh, is
kinds of
it?
reactors
I
in Idaho.
I
Oh,
thought
yeah.
they had moved that somewhere else, but
The
I
Navy
mean,
may have moved, but the reactors are still there.
isn't that funny how that works? Um, you you've been involved then obviously with engineering. You have this degree in engineering and in particular energy, an energy focus with your engineering. And so you're no stranger to that. You're not a stranger to the metro area, to the Orono area. Um, you've you've planted roots in back where you were born and raised, and you've decided at some point, and I can't yo gosh, you and I talked probably for the first time. I bet probably within months of me launching my channel. Um, I don't even
Sure.
remember how we I don't even remember how we ran across each other, but we talked back then, and when you launch an endeavor like this, you end up talking, and I'm not making excuses. This is just how it works. You launch an endeavor like this, and you end up talking to literally sometimes in the course of a year 100, 200, 300 people who are like, oh, I have a story to tell, and through no fault on anybody's part, you just end up losing contact with people. And you and I recently got back kind of into the orbit, and your story hasn't changed. Not that it would, but your story hasn't changed at all, other than you're even more dedicated to this energy independence. But it's cost you a ton of time and money and headaches. When when did you make the decision that you were going to go, for lack of better terminology, off grid, as close
Well,
as you can be to off grid there?
Yeah, I'm not really off grid. What I wanted, what started all of the hullabaloo was when I said, you know what? I found this super cool turbine in Taiwan. I want to represent them, but I can't sell them to you unless I install one on my property. And being a former planning commissioner and city councilman, I understood that I could. Where I did install it. And I installed a turbine in the most unobtrusive place. It was 20 feet tall, didn't go any higher than the gutter of my house. I wasn't violating any ordinances, but with local communities, they like to make stuff up and find ways to go.
No.
You're right, and find ways to go after you. Now, I grew up in Orono, and I can show you 3 different places where I know there were wind turbines, the old farm style, that operated 18-volt battery banks or 32-volt battery banks, depending on what it was. So this is nothing new to the community. And this
Right.
is something that's regulated by the state of Minnesota, where in 1995, they gave everybody in Minnesota the right to harvest the wind. So you start throwing all that in together, and I didn't know about the statute at the time, but
Right.
I
I just
knew.
want you to reemphasize that they gave everyone. You now have, according to the state of Minnesota, you have the right to harvest the wind. Before you needed permission.
Well, and okay, now that's a whole nother story, but you don't need
Yeah.
permission for anything. You own your property. You have a right to do whatever you want to on your property. The cities, the counties, the state can control that in a manner to protect health, safety, and welfare of individuals. So they have to have an actual logical reason in order to control what you're doing. So, for instance,
And like an objective, like if you're cooking meth in your backyard, that is objectively possibly very bad for your neighbors.
yes, because you could blow your house up,
Right.
you know? And so
A wind
installing a
a wind
basketball hoop.
turbine or chickens are not are not meth cooking. So
Right. Well, we actually got through the first lawsuit the first time they came after us, and we lost at the district court, and we got to the appeals court, and the appeals court ruled that a wind turbine was no different than clotheslines, flag poles, or a basketball hoops that populated the city uncontrolled. So, boom. Obviously, I knew what I was talking about. And the city took that because it got remanded to the city for consideration. They sent me a letter saying, okay, well, it's been remanded. Please resubmit your building permit. Now, you need to understand, I didn't submit a building permit to get permission. I submitted a building permit in order to force the city to come out and inspect it and ensure it was safe. City didn't understand that. They took it as me asking permission. You don't need permission. I did a video on this. You don't need permission for a permit. You already have the right. So, anyways, they sent me this letter saying, yeah, we'll resubmit your building permit. I sent them a letter back that said, screw off. Okay, it's been the appeals court ruled. It's no different than these other things. They don't need permits. Neither did we. The city took that as non-compliance, reopened the case with the same judge with the exact same reasoning. And she ruled against us again. And get this, she said right before she's going to rule, she's like, oh, this is very important. This is really, really important. I need to get this right. But you know what? I don't know very much about cities and ordinances. Honest to God, she said that. She admitted her ignorance in the area she was ruling, and she ruled against us again.
wait
So
a minute. What kind of judge was this? This obviously this wasn't criminal.
No, it was Marilyn Rosenbaum, Hennepin County Court Judge. And what they do in the courts, I found out, is they rotate their judges from civil to criminal to family or whatever, and they get rotated, and they take absolutely zero consideration of their abilities or
Expertise, like
qualifications.
their legal expertise. Like you
Right.
talk to an attorney. So like I'm sure you know who Tom Gallagher is.
Yep.
You talk to Tom Gallagher. Tom Gallagher is a criminal defense specialist with a focus in constitutional law. And he's very good at what he does. He's not going to sit down with somebody and in under normal circumstances and address real estate law.
Correct.
And nobody looks at these judges when they're either running or about to be appointed, whatever the case might be, when they're running for the position or being appointed to a position, if it somebody has to step in and appoint them for some reason, they don't take a look at them and go, yeah, you're not right for criminal law because you've been practicing contract law or
Forever.
elder law or whatever. Like you haven't done anything with criminal law or whatever since your internship.
Yep.
and and that's what you end up with these courts is you get judges who just literally the only thing that qualifies them is they are barred.
Right. And they don't know what they're talking about. And they even admit it in court. And that's not the only judge I've had admit something silly in court. But so anyway, she ruled against us again, of course, because that's what she was going to do. And when we appealed, we wrote the exact same appeal and said, by the way, res judicata, you can't keep going after us for the same thing. And my lawyer at that point in time in the court system, they were shifting over from personal to electronic service. My lawyer served the city electronically, and the city said, no, that's wrong. It should have been personal. So our case was dismissed for a technical blunder by our lawyer, not because we were wrong.
The thing that when you talk to people who are running afoul of the entire legal system, from the street cop all the way up to the courts, the thing that you run into are these repetitive accounts of somehow the courts, whether it be through prosecution or zoning commissions, just regular city or county entities, there's always some hang up that has to do with, oh, well, you should have known. And I think of, I don't know if you are familiar with Lisa Hanson or know her story, but she was a gal from Albert Lee who ended up she got imprisoned for keeping her business open during the virus.
Yep.
And one of the things that they got her on that ended up getting her arrested the first time was a summons that wasn't sent to her the way it should be, and she missed court over that, and they hung her out to dry on that. She didn't do anything wrong. She just but they used that against her. And that's what I'm hearing you say is, like, your attorney does what your attorney's supposed to do. Oh, well, that's not the right way of doing it. Well, then why do we have this option? Right?
Right.
Like,
Right. And the crazy thing is, ever since then, I've been held accountable for what my attorney failed to do right.
Which ultimately wasn't even you doing anything wrong.
Correct.
It wasn't your attorney even doing anything wrong. It was your attorney was doing the process the way your attorney knew the process to work. They just didn't like it.
Correct. And it's kind of like the fix was in at that point. Now, I've been in other numerous litigations, and what I've come to find out is there is a culture in the legal community where they get back together. It's really interesting because I used to tell my lawyer that they were corrupt. They didn't know what they were doing, because after we lost that, we eventually got another lawyer who got us back in the game, found the state statute. We overturned Orno's illegal wind turbine ban. We won that in court. Of course, nobody's ever respected our win on that. Where, by the way,
tell me you're making that up.
No, we've got a Hennepin County. Orno enacted a complete wind turbine ban after they thought they had us beat. Okay, they waited till they thought they had us beat. They enacted this ban, and then we sued them and said that's illegal, violates state statute, because the new lawyers we hired found the state statute from 1995. And we won hands down in months. The judge took this on and just hammered Orno and said, literally, that it's obvious the legislature wrote this statute to empower people to harvest the wind. Well, the city of Orono forgets that ever happened, and so do the judges. We won that. Orono never appealed it. That's the initial standing that everybody in Minnesota gets to. And the way it's written, if you live in an apartment building, you can put a turbine on your deck. That's the way the statute's written. But for some reason, we don't get the statute ever to be accountable in our favor. Ever.
Yeah, it's kind of like this young man, Sherburne County, and I don't want to go into his name too much right now because there's another court case that he's waiting on settling, but it's related to firearms, people who manufacture their own firearms, whether it be through 3D printing or buying unassembled pieces through kits and putting them together, and how they don't have serial numbers on them. And this young man is being prosecuted for not having serial numbers on a weapon that he made himself, that he assembled himself.
He's not a
And
corporation.
he's not a right. He's not right. He's not a business. And the case, his case is waiting on another case, and that's now in front of the Minnesota Supreme Court, and they took oral arguments on this here a couple of weeks ago, and I listened through both the defense and the state's arguments, and the state's asserting that there's no because they're the state, and the state, and I'll recognize this, you want the state to have more power than the federal government. That's just the way it was intended to be.
Yes.
But they're saying that when this law was written back in I think it was 1995, 94, 95, actually. When the law in Minnesota was written, they wrote it in a way that said no weapon can be owned by any person in the state of Minnesota if it doesn't have a serial number on it. Nothing's grandfathered in. And the state's arguing, even if you don't know that, it's your responsibility to get a serial number on any weapon that you have, no matter when it was built, whether you're building it by hand now. It's your duty to go out and get a serial number for that, and that you have to contact the ATF to get that done. And the defense is arguing much the same way you did with the wind turbine ban. It's clear here that that's not what the state meant. The state gave this, for lack of better terminology, gave the permission, or recognized the right of people to have, in the case of the firearms, a firearm that was built or manufactured before, I think it was 1968, or made in your own home with your own hands. And in this case, in your situation, you have a natural right to harvest the wind on your own property without having to go and get permission from anyone. And every single time one of these cases comes up, it's always the local government stepping in and going, "Nope, you don't understand. That's not what they meant. They intended for us to have the power."
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a couple things that go with that. Most cities in Minnesota are statutory cities, which means they have to follow state statute, and they have a hard time understanding that. The second big issue with all of this is you've got all of these attorneys that are farmed out that are simply taking it as the objective that it's us against them, that it's the city against the people. And that is so ridiculous, because the city is nothing without the people. It shouldn't be ever us against them. It should always be a search for what's the truth.
Oh, and that's it. How many times? I mean, you ran for city council, and I did years ago as well.
I won.
And I won. Right. And I won. And handily, much like your case, except for mine, it was a city of 2,200 at the time. But you listen to other people run for city council, and they say things like, "I'm going to represent the people. I'm here to watch out for the people." And almost without fail, they get into that position. They find out that all of a sudden people look at them different, and they now
Yep.
have become Orwellian. They,
Well,
the think of
I,
Animal Farm. It's just
you know what?
absolutely Animal Farm.
I think it's a little bit different than that. I think that they get into that position, and most of them are overwhelmed and not strong enough to maintain their own self. And they allow city staff and other council and other members to
Very true.
persuade them to get and go along.
No, and I'm running into that with somebody that I know that sits on a city board who has told me numerous times, like, TC, you would not understand, like, the looks I get when I ask just basic questions. It's like you're asking someone to expose like naked pictures of a family member.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
and it's like pulling teeth that people do not. This person told me, it's like, people, like, they hate you if you don't toe the line with what the non-elected city staff and then the elected city representatives are doing. You're the odd man out. People hate you.
And the
And
problem is, and I don't mean this as a blanket statement, but from what I've run into, city staff typically isn't very bright. They have their processes, they do what they're going to do. And then, if you don't toe the line, you're the enemy. And they set it up that way. And instead of ever really trying to talk to you and resolve things, they just try to bully you.
oh, like, I've got the letter here somewhere, from my city saying, "Hey, we did our annual property inspections and we noted you have chickens and you don't have a permit. Now go no, and go get permission from your neighbors, because that's how the permit's written. Our permitting process is written here. You have to have permission from any neighbor whose property is adjacent to yours.
No,
In other
geez.
words, not no road or alley in between." And
You you
so
know, they, they, they
before I can even apply for the permit, I have to go and get permission from my neighbors.
You know, let's just look back a little bit and think about Little House on the Prairie, right? That was our community. You think anybody thought they'd ever have to ask anybody for permission to have a food source on their property?
Well, and it's ironic that you use that example, because I live in Spring Valley, and that's one of our big claims to fame here, is the fact that Laura and Almanzo lived here in town
Yep.
for some time, and we live in an Ingalls. I live in an Ingalls house built by an Ingalls family member. And so when you bring that up, I'm literally looking in my backyard at my chickens every time I think about it, going, "There's no way in the world that anybody in this town at that time would have ever dreamed of having to go and get permission, not only from the city but from their neighbors,
Neighbors, yeah.
to have chickens." And that's been a little bit of your run in, is that's how bad our culture philosophically and politically has changed, because it's not just the city that's mad at you.
Yes. And that's exactly right. It was my neighbors that took it upon themselves to determine how they were going to deal with me. And they harassed and petitioned the city to exhaustion. I actually had the uphill neighbors here in depositions where the husband testified that he literally spent 15 to 20 hours a week following me on Facebook and other things and copying my stuff and sending it all to the city. And then when his wife testified, she said, "No, that's low. It's more like 30 to 40 hours." So you've got
She just so much for spousal privilege. She just
right. He threw it right under the bus. But it's like, really? You have nothing better to do than harass me over trying to go green, by the way, within state statute. And then you just harass the city so much. I mean, I had the deputy chief Fisher tell me at one point in one of the meetings we had with him over other things that, yeah, the neighbors wanted to call this meeting with us over your wind turbine. And I'm like, I've got 2 rapes and a burglary I have to deal with. I don't have time for this stuff. But that never stopped those people. It was police report after police report after police report.
And
Over
that's
get
the
this,
other. And go
over
ahead,
get
finish
this
your thought.
broken string on the property line, broken branches, man crouching by the property line 2 weeks ago, and the best, most famous one when they called in for a bonfire. The cop wrote down we were cooking hot dogs on a grill.
They I almost use an inappropriate phrase there. We had one of my moderators, Jugalassis, says, "I'm very interested in learning more about wind turbines." You Jugalassis in the description of the video. You can go in and find out how to reach out to Jay, and he is a perfect asset and resource for all of this.
For wind turbines, for solar
Yep,
power, for
solar.
battery banks, custom design to what you're doing, and especially for people like us, DIYs, where not only
Yep.
can you save probably up to 30-40% on the project doing it yourself, but you get to recover 30% of the money the government would otherwise have stolen from you for putting this project together.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's I think there's a misconception out there with people who are maybe a little bit more the small L libertarian philosophy, or small government Republican conservative types, that we hate wind energy, we hate solar, we hate these. We don't. We just don't like the idea that the only entity that has the power to generate power and the right to generate power is some corporate conglomerate that gets all the benefits of generating the power and then selling the power to local government, who then taxes the piss out of you, for lack of better terminology, to be able to use that power, whether it be normal power generation or wind turbines or solar fields. And when you when you look at the way solar's handled by most of the energy companies that are out there, with all their protections or corporate protections by all of the the state and county and city governments, they are inept. They are terribly inept. But a person with solar energy and wind turbine options on their own property, far more efficient.
Oh, absolutely. Here's the thing people don't understand. I'm sure the government may or may not understand, but when you make 2 kilowatts of electricity out in southwestern Minnesota and it gets to you here in the metro area, you only got 1 kilowatt left. It's called
Mm-hmm.
losses. When you
Mm-hmm.
have the renewable energy on site, you have no losses. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so from that perspective, you need half of the equipment to power the same amount of houses if we're all on site. Not only
Right.
that, if we had all these different on-site things going on, that reduces the stress on the grid. And then the grid doesn't have so many issues. What I really want to focus a little more on is there used to be no oil, there used to be no gas, there used to be no electric line. Everybody somehow in this world survived using either the wind or the sun as their energy source. Maybe horses or carts or whatever, whatever they
Which
use.
you're not advocating for the end of automobiles, by the way.
No, hell no. I got 2 old Chris Crafts. I got a 71 Nova. I got my own things, and I'm not against fossil fuels, but it's time we recognize that everything's limited in the world, including nuclear fuel, including everything. And the only thing that isn't unlimited is that big globe in the sky. That thing's always there. How do we take best advantage of it, like our society did all the years until we invented or came upon energy production?
Well, and it's funny too, because I know there's a lot of conversation about nuclear power when it comes to energy generation. But the one thing that the entities, the powers that be, they hate fossil fuels. And I can understand why, when it comes to generating enough electricity to keep any city of any size going. I could see that and understand it to some degree. But their answer is always something that requires the most amount of infringement upon other people's property rights. Always. It's always. It's like, oh,
No,
well, we want to put in these solar fields, but we're going to
I,
have to take some property to do that. And,
no.
and
You know what? I would say it's not infringement upon people's property because there's a lot of farmers who are happy to turn over some part of land to make money off of solar for consistent revenue year in and year out. You know, things like that. I would say it's definitely more about control of the population than anything else. And, you know, this can get me to our happy Governor Walz, who I have petitioned again and again. I have the opportunity to build these wind turbines in the United States. I've approached Governor Walz over and over that we could do this. And I keep getting blown off. I actually got in once and then they wouldn't answer my phone calls afterwards. And it
no
drives
pun
me
intended, correct?
right. But it drives me nuts that I listen to this guy in a press conference saying, "Oh, we got to start thinking outside the box." So I send him a box, right? Inside it, I got a solar powered hat. Outside, pictures of my turbines with my original proposal, and I don't hear from the guy. I gave you outside the box. There's something we can make here that's almost 100% recyclable, that produces energy, can only be good for the environment, but you don't even want to talk to me.
Well, and I think you're right. It is about control of the people. And one of the best ways to control people is to control their energy. And you can control their energy by granting the right to generate energy to anybody but the people.
Corporate monopolies.
Yeah.
Corporate, you know, and I hate to use these words, but that's how fascism works.
Well,
You
I
know?
don't have a problem using those words because when you look around, what most people refer to as capitalism in the U.S. is not capitalism. It's either
No,
it's crony capitalism at best. It's or more often than not, it's fascism or mercantilism is what it is.
correct, correct.
And that boy explaining mercantilism to people is that is not in my wheelhouse for the next couple of months. I'll tell you that.
No, no.
It's a very difficult topic, but
And
it's what it is.
the problem is trying to get people to understand that they have to have a basis to even understand it.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
and
for
we're
sure.
and we aren't teaching these bases anymore.
No, not at all. When you look at your wind turbine and what you've had to fight to be able to just have that wind turbine on your property, because you're still out there, still generating your own electricity. Um, are you selling your electricity to the grid now? Are you in a place where you're able to do that, or is that not something that's allowed?
No, that's absolutely allowed. It's very the renewable energy industry and utilities are very, very regulated, and the utilities are forced to accept certain things. Now, it doesn't mean they don't make it difficult on you, and Excel can be the worst in dealing with the utility about any of this stuff, but they are forced by what's going on to accept and deal with it. So that's not really an issue. I remember a few years ago Excel and others were pushing the legislature to get rid of net metering. Now, what net metering is during the day when your solar's up, you're making a lot of electricity, you're not home extra, it goes back up the grid. And for every kilowatt hour up the grid, you get a kilowatt hour back. So it's net zero, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
what net metering is. They wanted to get rid of that. What they wanted to do was buy the stuff from you wholesale during the day and sell it back to your retail at night. So they even wanted to make money off the electricity you were producing. At that point, I wrote a letter I wrote an editorial to the Star Tribune that got published. And I heard it was a talk of the Capitol, and they trounced the idea to squash net metering because of the editorial I wrote. Same thing actually happened down in Florida, where FP&L was pushing them to get rid of it. The legislature voted for it, and I don't know if it's because of what I had published down there, because I wrote a similar type editorial, but Governor DeSantis vetoed what was going on and protected the little people.
This is actually a pretty apropos thought or question. Sarah from Owatonna says, I know I'll sound ignorant, but my understanding was that solar panels were terrible for the environment when they needed to be disposed of. Um, can you shed light on that?
Absolutely. She's absolutely right. When you look at the word were, okay, things have changed. Recycling's coming around just like anything else. And solar panels have a lot of silver in them, especially the older ones. And so those things are worthwhile to recycle. Um, we're in the infantile stages of recycling, but at this point, they actually are recycling solar panels, so it's not like they're all just dumped in the landfill anymore. The
Unlike the
big
giant wind turbine
blades, yeah,
skeletons that we see, like I live about
yeah.
18 miles from the little town of Grand Meadow, which is kind of the hub for the wind turbines, the corporate wind turbines that are going up. What are the towers in Minnesota on average? 200 feet, 220 or something like that.
You know what? They're getting bigger all the time.
Yep. But
Yeah.
this poor little town of Grand Meadow, I mean, it's a spot in the road, and it's the eyesore of the wind turbine graveyard, as the pieces that are replaced just pile up and pile up and pile up, pile up, pile up on the edge of town. None of that can actually be recycled. It's they
Well,
just sit there. It- well, it,
it's not that none of it can be recycled. Just like solar panels is in kind of the infantile stage of recycling, for the big wind turbines, it's kind of the infantile stage. So instead of just burying stuff, they're actually cutting some of these up, recycling them. And what they do with a lot of the blades, because they're fiberglass, is they cut them up and use them as a concrete mix to strengthen the concrete. Okay, so they're
well, it should
finding
be
ways
nice to see him do that locally here, because that
right,
poor
right. No,
town
no,
is.
I'm not saying it's perfect, and I'm not saying you're wrong. What I'm saying is they're actually starting to work on this and understand that just like any other industry, you got to figure out how to recycle your products. You got to figure out how to make it earth friendly. Yes, it's earth friendly, and you're making electricity, but there's a lot of other issues too.
Right. So same thing with like used motor oil. There's
Yep.
all sorts of stuff that can be done with that, but nobody really wants to touch on that. Um, Juggalasis has brings this up. Because I hear this from people all the time. I was told it was illegal for me to get off public utility system, and
Uh,
that
that's
and there again,
possible. I'd have to know where he lives. I know that down in Cape Coral, Florida, they passed an ordinance because of some lady who wanted off the sewer system. She didn't want to pay the bill anymore and took care of her own waste in her own way. That they made a law that you can't go off grid in Florida at all. Now that's silly because they've got plenty of islands with houses that have no electricity unless they're off grid. So it's interesting how Florida can be pretty. I mean, to me, Florida is so much more progressive with Minnesota than it comes to renewable energy. They've got a state law that says no community housing authority or anything can stop you from putting in anything renewable all the way down to a clothesline. So if you want to fight them, you can. But then they come across this way that's saying, well, you can't go off grid. So that's a problem. Right there is a great demonstration of the problem of government.
yeah, they do so much that will. Well, it's the cronyism. It's that kind of that fascism of combining the corporate in with the government granted monopolies, and Kaler, I'm assuming, is related to someone in here somewhere. The
Yeah,
utility companies. Go ahead.
Kaler's my son.
I assumed. The utility companies are government granted monopolies, says so right in their charters and government law slash policy. Every single one in the USA gets subsidies. And that's it. They not only do they get subsidies, but they also get to charge you for their product and set their own prices. You can't shop it around, and you can't, in a lot of places, you can't get off grid. You can't.
There's only one place in the United States you can shop it around, and that's Texas. where they've got a bit of a free market when it comes to this. But like when a few years ago when they had the big Texas freeze and all the turbines went down because they're terrible, and it turned out to be the natural gas systems that froze that triggered everything. Everybody was paying a ton of money. I mean, literally thousands of dollars a day to run their house. So it's interesting that the only place you could go in a free market, it was not prepared for catastrophe, and then it screwed the people on it.
Well, and that's not shocking, especially in a place like Texas, which wasn't prepared. Like if you could do that in Minnesota, the companies up here would be so, they'd be so prepared for that, they'd almost wouldn't know how to respond in good weather.
Exactly. Although, I remember a number of years ago when a company in Western Minnesota bought a bunch of used turbines from California, installed them, and they never worked because
Well, because they came from California.
well, they installed the wrong oil viscosity because they didn't understand it freezes here.
Well, we had. Oh, excuse me. I'm so. I'm yawning because I was expending a ton of my own energy trying to get up and running on time, and that failed.
Yeah.
I had a guy on who was a turbine tech who came on and told horror stories about systems with their the oil based is it lubrication, for lack of better terminology?
Yeah.
It's and just telling the horror stories about the how bad it was for the environment, because these things would leak gallons and gallons of lubricant even in a good system, and that they were out there working on these things all the time, and yet they'd hear from people, oh, thank you for installing these and protecting my environment. And they're like, your environment's being protected because you live 300 miles away from where this energy is being generated, but the people who live here are dealing with the oil leaking all over on their fields. And
Oh, yep.
and
No,
it's
no, I would not doubt that at all. And there's more than that with the big turbines. You got low frequency vibrations that cause people all kinds of health issues. I mean, we could go on. The bird kills. That's the nice thing about our turbines. They're small. The birds see them. They don't run into them. They don't cause any of these low frequency stuff. It's 100% recyclable, just about. It's just a great, and then you can make your electricity on site. And that's why I don't understand. Well, I do. Why our Governor Walz, who's more of a government person as opposed to a person, would want to prevent people from like us from taking care of ourselves.
well, and the thing that floors me about that too is, yeah, you're technically not off grid because you connect to the grid and you could sell your surplus energy to the grid, but they still want to fight everybody on that. And then you think about it, like, isn't this really what you want? I mean, you want people to learn to generate energy with this green perspective, but when
No,
a person when a
no,
person
you're wrong.
sets up, they to do that, they're like, no, you can't do that. We've got to do it.
Exactly. And that's just it. It's all about control. We don't want to empower the little person anymore. We want to control the little person. And even in the green energy field, that's exactly how it is. I mean, I'm
Chris
sorry.
Milky makes this point. He says in 20 years, there's going to be a mess of toxic green energy waste, and the landowner is going to be responsible for cleanup. And that's like, if you're generating your own electricity and you're using a turbine or you're using, solar panels, you're safer for your own environment than anything the government's going to do.
Oh, geez,
Because
yeah.
they're not going to be looking at it from the perspective of what's the most efficient, safest, cleanest way. They're just going to look at it from how are we going to get the most energy out of this situation as fast as possible. That's
Well,
it.
not only that, you're going to run into corporate pollution, corporate this and corporate that. And corporation, just like anything else, is going to fight. If they're okay, great example. They had a big nuclear leak, water leak up at Monticello Nuclear Power Plant a year or two ago. Did a
Yeah, I think
couple
that
of
was, yeah,
videos.
2 years ago. I think you're right.
I did well, it was like 2 years ago, I think. And I can't remember the kind of tetra somethings. I can't remember what it was. It was a mild radiation. And they said there was going to be this much waste. That was it. Turned out that what they did was to mitigate it, was to pump a lot of the water that seeped out so that they could filter it all. And they ended up pumping well over 10 times as much as they ever predicted, which means how much more got into the environment. So this is how corporations work. Okay. When you're dealing with stuff on your own property, do you think you're going to keep it clean, or do you think you're going to let it go to crap?
That's right.
And when corporations deal with it and they get busted, what do? They simply defend themselves and say whatever.
Right.
And that's what we are stuck with our corporatized, monopolized energy grid.
It's and I know you could speak to this, but there again, I'm down here in the wind corridor, and I talk to farmers who have sold rights. And I think, what are they? I think it's like each windmill is, gets like a quarter acre or something. A wind turbine
Yep.
gets like a quarter acre or something like that. And some of these farmers have 20, 30, 40 of these things on, running along their acreages. And they made these promises like, we're going to get the electricity. We're not even going to notice. It's not going to interfere with our agricultural work or any of that. And some of them will tell you, like, yeah, okay, I don't have quite as much room for corn or beans because that's all we freaking grow in Minnesota, really. Um, but what they tell you, and I don't know if anybody's ever said this to you before, but what they'll tell you is they get tired of the whoosh. It
Yep.
never goes away. He says you could be a mile away, and you hear it all the time when they're operating. It's just a constant, just the whoosh. After a while, it's becomes mind numbing
Yep.
when it's quiet, when you're not, in the tractor or, mowing the yard or whatever. It's just that whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. You're surrounded by it.
It's kind of a Chinese water torture thing.
I guess I never thought about it that way, but yeah.
It is, where they do the drip, drip, drip on you. It's the
Mhm.
same kind of thing. It's a mental thing that gets to you, and I completely get it.
Now, the system that you use is completely different. You don't have your turbine does not look at all um, like what most people would imagine a turbine looking like.
No, no, it's like an upside down egg beater, and it sits there and spins. And from when I first got involved with the company in 2009, compared to now, that they've redesigned it 5 different times. They've improved the efficiency. They've made it quieter, fewer vibrations. I mean, they keep improving the project, and it's no different than having a flag on your property of the same size.
Right. Um, what's the noise factor like for you there?
We did a noise study in St. Paul because he had three 1,500-watt models on the roof and a 3,000 in the parking lot. We passed a nighttime noise study to Minnesota statute with no problem.
Really? So
Yeah.
what do they look for in decibels on that?
Well, it's always hard when you're testing wind because there's wind.
Right.
You've got the background, and that's what you find out is even when these things are going kind of fast, the noise of the wind covers it up.
So the system that you use in particular is far less intrusive because of its size and its location on your own property, as opposed to the turbines that you see that people are familiar with, which have to be as big as they are to be able to do what they're demanding them to do. Is what the difference is, I would imagine.
Oh, correct. Absolutely. People, just like solar doesn't work everywhere, wind doesn't work everywhere. You have to have the property for one or the other. Or, we're talking about these two. There's micro hydro. There are a bunch of different opportunities in renewable. And if you're in a good wind area, you're going to know it, and you're going to put the turbine where the wind is good, and then you're going to do well. And I'll tell you, while I've had my wind turbines here, and we were on the solar energy tour, people literally come out and just sit down and watch a turbine spin for half an hour because it was so cool. It's like a work of art in your yard.
It and it generates more than enough energy for your household.
No, no, it depends how much energy you use and what size turbine you have. Just like solar, you have to have different size solar systems to accommodate for your yearly use. You'd have to do the same with turbines. Now, I do know that I had a turbine in Western Minnesota at New London Spicer High School, making over 9,000 kilowatt hours a year. Now that would be probably 2/3 of an average house.
Say that again. 2/3 of
Two
an
thirds of
average.
an average house, somewhere around there, and it was making 9,000 kilowatt hours a year. So people typically use on somewhere 1,000 or less kilowatt hours a month. Somewhere it depends. Not my community, but on average. And so if you're making 9,000 kilowatt hours a year, that's 2/3 to 3/4 of what you would be using.
That's still a massive savings.
Oh, absolutely. It's tremendous. It can be completely tremendous. And these are 20-year products. You got to understand with the way they spin in this vertical formation, they've only got 2 or 3 heavy duty bearings in the middle of them. And these things, their heavy duty truck bearings are used to a point load. These things are never exposed to a point load. It's always a consistent load all the way around the bearing. These things last forever. I haven't had a mechanical failure yet.
What's maintenance like then for you on that? Are you having to do? Is it a weekly
Nothing.
oiling or?
Nothing. You can't get at the bearings. There's no oiling to do. These things are made for Taiwan, the typhoon capital of the world. We're sitting up here in Minnesota where we don't have any salt to impregnate stuff and corrode stuff. And like I said, the bearings they
and
use.
and nobody uses it to cook in Minnesota, so
Yeah, exactly. So no, these things are going to last you a long, long time. The solar panels are up to the point where they have a 25-year warranty, and so are the Enphase microinverters. These things are just along the same line. They're going to last you that long, without much of an issue. Literally, I would go to wind shows and be showing my turbine and this and that. All the other wind turbine manufacturers get mad at me because I say that there's no maintenance. Well, there's always some maintenance. They get mad at me. I say, not really. I don't ever have to go do anything. What does that
don't
mean to
you
you?
love it when somebody tells you that's not true?
Right?
Like about the very thing that you're like
Dealing with.
selling and working on.
Yeah.
Well, and it wouldn't do you any good to be disingenuous about that
Right.
to a potential customer, because that would come back and haunt you and bite you in the
Right.
ass, so to speak, if you're lying about it.
Right. No, and I don't lie. All I can do is tell them what I know, and what's happened. I haven't had a mechanical failure, and these things run great. And I've never had to do any maintenance on any of them. I could sell you a maintenance contract if you want to pay me money. That's fine.
Like, I really don't know.
That's fine with
When
me.
so when you we we ended up delving into it in a very interesting way, but like, so you go through all of this to you fight all these battles, starting with your neighbors, going, extending to the city, then having, basically then facing down the state, which was really weird because you're facing down the state through the courts, and having to explain to judges like, no, the state statutes allow this, like they encourage it, they want us to do this, they're telling us we should do this. And where has that left you now? I mean, are you still in limbo legally? Is there still stuff going on? How are things with the neighbors now? I mean, what's it
Well,
like?
the neighbors uphill who sued us, sued the city to sue us and sued us, ended up selling us their house to resolve the lawsuit.
So they sued you and lost their house.
Correct. Their dream retirement home. Yep.
Would you counter sued or?
No, that was the settlement agreement because they were getting there's no way they were going to win. It was the second time they'd tried. There were severe issues with their deal, and unfortunately, the courts never want to rule on this stuff because they're not really competent. They want to keep sending you back to mediation so they don't have to deal with it. It's that kind of issue. As far as where we are now, my frustration has always been that lawyers are semi incompetent and they never get the story straight and they never say what you really want them to. And when the judges ask him this and that, and you want to scream out, here's the truth, you don't get to tell the truth.
Yeah.
So,
You don't get, isn't it funny? It's your case and you can't speak.
oh, yeah, no, the whole point is to shut you up. So I have taken it upon myself to take my legal stuff into my own hands. And I've got 2 lawsuits out right now. One against the city of Orono in federal court, which I lost at the district court level, but I'm appealing. And this is more of a, because I've been through all these different lawsuits and all these different things over the years with the neighbors, the cities, and I've sued them and they sued me. And it's been all this back and forth. And the thing that's happened is the guy who's now mayor of our town was a city councilman when he proclaimed that he was going after our property and going to target us. And then he started a company. Now, my company's Go Green Energy LLC. He started a Minnesota corporation called Go Green Energy LLC Corporation while he was on the city council. Then he used city funds to sue me. So here I am with city councilman.
Hey, what?
Yep. You heard that.
Was that the wife in the background?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She's listening. Yep. Absolutely. So you've got a city councilman / mayor who formed a corporation to mirror mine, who testified he wanted to get into the green energy business and use public funds to try to chase me out of town. And I've lost a bunch of things along the way, which I really think are wrong because the judges aren't following the law. But that's not what my federal suit's about. My federal suit is about the fact that there is a huge conflict of interest going on. And no matter how many complaints I've filed with the police, the city, or anybody, nobody would ever acknowledge or deal with it. They've never said it didn't happen. And so my federal suit is about, it's actually a long-term RICO conspiracy. And it's kind of hilarious because it's
kind of fun to use RICO against the government.
Yes, but it's perfectly fit. It fits perfectly. It's a 128-page complaint, which very well could have been 300 to 400 pages. I've narrowed it down to like 12 defendants instead of probably the 50 that were involved. My exhibits are like 1,100 pages instead of 5,000. But the first thing the federal court judge rules is, well, I could dismiss this on the Rule 8 motion that it's too long. Now, my response to that is, first of all, it's not my fault that these people did this over all this time. But by the way, President Trump's defending a 98-page RICO claim that happened over several months, not 12 years. So lengthwise, I fit right in the scheme. I'm appealing it on other reasons. And my whole goal here, I kind of knew it was going to come to this, was that I want to get in front of the judges and they need to look me in the eye because I'm not a convicted felon. Doing a pro se appeal is the last ditch effort to get out of jail.
Right.
I'm a disabled U.S. Navy veteran, former city councilman and planning commissioner, asking why my rights don't matter. And I need 3 federal judges to look me in the eye and tell me, yes, all these doctrines and little things and this and that are more important than your rights. That's what my lawsuit's about, my federal suit. And
It's
that's
got a
where I
lot.
am in the appeal.
Um,
I mean, that's a lot to consider, isn't it? And the crazy thing is, I can only do this myself. I could never trust a lawyer to get this message across.
well, I've run into this, and there again, the good lawyers that are that are really going to take the bull by the horns are hard to find. I mean, I could think of a few, but go back to that case I was talking about. What that's in front of the Minnesota Supreme Court right now with this young man over, not the one from Sherburne County, but the one he's waiting on this case to be decided by the courts. He's he's looking at this, or they're looking at this, and how do I want to say this? You want them to admit that they just don't care, is what
Yep.
this comes down to. You
Yep.
just you almost need them to say, we don't care about the individual.
Yep.
We don't care. And even though you'd be losing on a technical, legal perspective, you're getting it's almost
I'm making a
a
point.
win. It's a win in that you're getting them to admit the agenda.
That's
And
right.
that's what it's hard for people to fathom that, because they view winning. It's like when you talk to somebody who's an independent or a third party who's running for office, and they're like, "Oh, you don't have any chance of winning. You're just going to hurt these other candidates." And the person who's honest goes, "I don't care."
Yep.
It's that's I want people to see that. And yeah, but you're gonna campaign and you're gonna lose. But I'm pointing out to all of you how stacked the system is against you.
Oh,
And
exactly.
people have a very hard time with that, because they still want to believe that these systems are all neutral, that
They want to
the legal
believe what
system is
they've been
neutral. And
indoctrinated. They want to believe what they've been indoctrinated to believe is that
yep,
we've got a fair two-party system with a wonderful judicial system that doesn't screw anybody over. And I'll tell you what. When I was put in jail for a useless chunk of buried concrete in my yard, I was jailed for 5 days over a useless chunk of buried concrete over this wind turbine fiasco. And I'll tell you what, the homeboys in jail, they got it, right? They
well,
understood
they know.
what it
Yeah, they
was
know.
like. Yes, because the system
It's
isn't about justice or fairness. The system is about the system.
right. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I've got
Chris,
one
no,
other lawsuit. Hold on. I got one other lawsuit going now. And this one I'm running against my city and state court. And I think I got them on the run because they violated the law, and it's obvious. There was a lady up here who shotgunned her kid to death. I think it was 7 years old, Eli Hart. 9 times she shot him. The cops caught her over across the lake here in her car with no tires on the front rims, a back window shot out, blood in the car, and they drove her home to shower. I mean, if it was you or me with any one of these things going on, we would have been cuffed and
please,
stuff till next year, right?
please tell me.
Right.
I cannot. I like.
They drove her home to shower. So I put in a data request. And as a turbine guy up here in Orono, I do news reporting on what's going on. And I had done a bunch of reports on what happened. I got a little YouTube series on it. And so anyways, I'm like, I got to know, why the heck did they drive her home? So I put a data request in after she was convicted, and they rightly denied me the data, saying that none of this is available until her appeals are finished. Well, I'll give her this credit. She never appealed anything. She left the families alone, convicted of first-degree murder, right? So she's gone forever. And I put that first data request in February. It turned out that her appeal period passed in May 10th. So then all the data was available. The city never gave me the data, so I reapplied for it in August when I got around to it, and they gave me the same reason: we can't give it to you because blah blah blah. So they violated state data request statute. So once I did a little research, I found out that even if I want the video data out of that, I have to go to a judge. And if I got to go to a judge anyways, and they violated the data statute, then I might as well just sue them for everything. So that's what I did. I wrote up a lawsuit. Then I found out from the Orono PD clerk that Soren Maddock, the city attorney, gave the directive to tell me not to. So I sued the city attorney too. Well, they're all up in arms. They are all up in arms that I'm suing an attorney because attorneys are golden. And I'm like, attorneys are not above the law.
Well, it's funny that you say. It's funny that you bring that up, because that's what we're running into in Olmsted County. I don't live in Olmsted, but that's the agency I worked for, was the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office for almost 13 years. And people have this skewed idea that county attorneys somehow are these, as you said, this almost golden. They're untouchable.
Yeah.
And we're running into that in this case with this young man whose story I've been telling for a while now, where the county attorney has ordered law enforcement, for lack of better terminology, to not take any evidence from this young man as he's busting sexual predators.
Oh, Jesus.
I will not prosecute any evidence or any person based on any evidence that Chase brings me. And people are hearing this going, well, what's this got to do with wind turbines? As I was explaining in the opening of the show tonight, this isn't about wind turbines. And I think you would agree with me, Jay. This isn't about the wind turbines. This is not about you having solar panels and an energy bank on your property. That's not what this is about. This is about the system. It's always geared towards protecting itself.
Yep.
Whether it's a nonpartisan or a partisan position, whether it's appointed public servants or elected public servants, they all get into this. They all get wrapped up in all of this together, and everything boils down to what can we do to protect ourselves. And they condition people to think or to operate on, if you want to get your neighbor, if you want to get somebody that you don't like, you can use the system as long as you play the system or play the game the way the system wants it played. And that's what you ran into in your situation with your neighbors. We had the same thing here in Spring Valley. We had a military veteran, a veteran of the global war on terror, comes back with PTSD, can't drive. He has a little lawnmower that he rides around, and his neighbors don't like him because he uses it at like 6 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock at night or whatever. And so one time he drove the tire of his little lawnmower over their property line, and they claimed he damaged their yard. And so they went to City Hall and demanded an ordinance about noise, and they only wanted it for their neighborhood.
That's hilarious, because you know what? Yeah, because I got 2 turbine flagpoles down on the corner of my property, and there'd never ever been a flagpole complaint. And I called them flagpoles; they called them turbines. I said they're flagpoles with rotary globes. Yeah, they're bigger than normal, but that's what they are. And so the city of Orono adopted an ordinance specifically stating you can only have 1 flagpole on the shoreline because of 1 complaint from my neighbor about me.
And that's where I was going with this, is that if you are willing to play the game the way the system wants it played, they're going to side with you every time. And so now here you have a city attorney doing just like this county attorney, Mark Ostrom in Olmsted, giving directives to people that he doesn't have the authority to give directives to. And they just do it. They just do it.
Correct. Now, here's the best part about this lawsuit. It turns out maybe the attorney didn't give that directive. It was just the fact that he gave it the first time, and the clerk repeated it the second time, and it might not have been his fault. Since then, I've withdrawn my claims against that attorney because they've circled the wagons and taken responsibility of the OPD. And I'm no idiot. If there's not a case there, I'll walk away from it. But that attorney filed a frivolous litigant motion against me, trying to call me a frivolous litigant. Because as the first letter his lawyer sent to the judge said, I was in about 26 lawsuits with the city. Well, except that's not true. So he lied to the judge. I've been in 16 different lawsuits with the city. No, I think it's less than that. But then I've only filed 16
It's been 24 and not one more.
No. Actually, if you look at it, I have literally been in 26 lawsuits. And if you look at like a conciliation court that's been escalated and that kind of deal, I've literally only been in 21 lawsuits.
Right.
And if you look at how many I've been in with the city, it's been less than that. So you've got a lawyer lying to the judge to start out with, realizing they lied and trying to backtrack but still go after me. And here's the crazy thing about this frivolous litigant thing. There's different legs you have to follow in order to accomplish it. The first 3 legs of the frivolous litigant thing I accomplished, so there's no way they could go after me. So what I did was I filed for sanctions against the attorney, filing a frivolous litigant motion because it's frivolous. So that's
I love it. I love it. You use the frivolous accusation against him in a very legitimate way.
Oh yeah. So get this. So I filed this lawsuit against them last fall. This spring, I filed another data request because I've been doing videos on the city and their corruption. And I said, I want this data from here to here. And they said, well, we'll give that to you, but it's going to cost you $120, $30 every hour for research. I said, okay, that's fine. I don't want to pay that. Here's what I'll do. I'll take any of the data you have that involves me, the Turbine Guy, my YouTube channel, or any other denoter of me. Because in Minnesota, when you request data about yourself, they cannot charge you.
Cannot charge you for it.
She said, that doesn't matter. We're still going to have to charge you the $120. So in the middle of a data request violation suit, they violated the data statute again. So I've got supplemental pleadings in going after them for violating it in the middle of the lawsuit.
Yeah. Folks, there again, this is why I opened the show the way that I opened it tonight, is because this is what we're dealing with.
Yes.
This isn't about wind turbines. This isn't about chickens. This isn't about, people, doing First Amendment auditing or Second Amendment auditing. This isn't about, Chase Johnsons and the predator poachers that are out there, busting got to be careful how you say that on YouTube.
Doing their job.
Doing a job that, citizen policing, if you will. It's not about all these individuals and all these individual things. It is about us each individually. But this is just the system that we've allowed to be formed around us, because for a lot of us, we've stuck our heads in the sand and said, no, that happens in big metro areas. That happens in or in metro area, people go, well, that happens in those little rinky dink towns and counties and stuff somewhere where, everybody knows everyone. And greases the palms because they've lived in town for their whole lives and they own, a bar or a construction company or something. No, folks, this is happening every freaking where. It's everywhere. It's every single place that you look. And it's happening whether it's a Republican-run administration or a Democrat-run administration.
Yeah. And the thing about the local communities is it's typically not one or the other. There's not both. Right. There's not a lot of Democrat or Republican at a city council level. What it is it's more of an HOA mentality that we get to control you because you live here, without understanding that no. I have my inherent rights and you have to prove to me why you're taking them away.
and not just prove to me, or not prove to me, let me clarify, not prove to me why you're taking them away, but what authority you have to take them
Yes.
away, and how that's good for all individuals, not for the community. I'm so sick of hearing this. Well, it's for the community. No. How is you removing my individual right good for all individuals?
Well, okay,
All
now
individuals.
I got a quick story that goes perfectly along that. When we bought the neighbor's house after they sued us, one of the things I did was replace a driveway. I had gotten several permits to do things on that property because I knew I needed to. And for the driveway, I couldn't find any permit to get anywhere. The word driveway wasn't listed in the code, right? And so I just started doing the driveway. And of course, when does the inspector show up? When the cement truck does, right? I've been working on this thing for weeks, and all of a sudden, the inspector shows up. Well, you need a landscaping permit. I'm like, okay, whatever, I'll apply for
What?
it. Yeah, and if you read the code, that's the way the code, whatever. So I applied for it the next day. So fine, I'll apply for it. Big deal. I had no worries. I took a driveway, part of the driveway, and a sidewalk away. I removed a fence. I was making the driveway smaller. I got no issues, right? And so I applied for it. Well, they sent me this builder acknowledgement form, and that said I had to sign off on these deals. And my issue was when we first got that house, the first time it rained lightly, city stormwater was entering the driveway. And I'm like, well, you got to get your stormwater out of my driveway. I can't sell it. And the city's, get this, a civil engineer who's now the city administrator, the public works director, responds to me that the problem was my 40-year-old driveway settled. It wasn't the 3-year-old road. I'm like, come on, man. Really?
Never had this problem until you replace the road, folks.
Right, right. Yeah. So I sent them an email. Said, "What do you think? I'm a moron? I'm an engineer too. I know this is your problem." They never wanted to deal with their water drainage issue. They wanted to push it on me. So in this driveway permit application, they were trying to require me to put a 1 5/8 inch lip on my driveway because then I wouldn't get their water in. Right? I'm supposed to pay to solve their problem. Well, I asked them, where in the code does it give you the authority to make me do this? And he gave me a code section, and I read it. And I said, yeah, that's great, but that's for curb and gutter streets. That's not for our street. We don't have curb and gutter. And then he says, well, that's just a suggestion to help you with your water drainage problem. So they would not.
So it's a suggestion, not a requirement.
Right. And they would not issue the permit until I signed off on their suggestion/requirement. I absolutely refused. I said, nobody else asked you. Why would I? My wife and I were criminally prosecuted for failure to obtain a permit to replace a driveway. And the two requirements were the 1 5/8 inch lip, which, by the way, they said was a suggestion, and that we didn't provide hardcover calculations, which I had a letter that said we didn't have to because the driveway was smaller. So they charged us on what they knew. We went to court. We went through trial. My wife was dismissed halfway through for lack of probable cause because she had nothing to do with any of it. And the statute they used said the people doing the work. I'm actually kind of pissed at the city because they should have been charging my son and my buddy. Those guys should have been in court with me, right?
I'm sure Kaylor's thrilled to hear you say that.
Oh, he would have loved it, trust me. But then at the end of the trial, I represented myself pro se. I was found not guilty. How's that for crazy? So my wife now has a malicious prosecution claim against the city for charging her with lack of probable cause. Only because we stood up. Now here's a caveat to this story. We found out there's 2 other couples in Orono who have been similarly charged for husbands doing work on the property, and they charge a wife. Every time they charge a wife, it was unconstitutional. And the city is now arguing because we got away with it before. We had every right to get away with it now.
And I keep coming back to this. I know people are going to think I sound like a broken record, but
it's hard not to.
It it irritates me to no end that people look at these things. Here, I'll use an example, Jay, that I think that you and everyone else can get behind. We listen day in and day out to the uniparty, the duopoly at every level. And like you said, it's more of an HOA mentality at city councils and county commissions. But we know that it does break down, for lack of better terminology, with people still looking at it along party lines. But we listen day in and day out as Republicans come in and they oppose every law that a left-leaning Democrat will propose. They just constantly. Just on the face of it, just because it's a left-leaning Democrat. Or they are behind a law that the Democrats are opposing just because the Democrats are opposing it. But the minute that law gets passed, their protestations to the contrary all go out the window, because now it's law, and we're the law and order people. So if it's law, you have to follow it. And I bring that up because I look at what they've done with you, what they're doing with other people, or people like me who get these letters saying, "Well, you're in violation of our code, our city code about having chickens." And people will look at people like you, they'll look at people like me, and they'll look at others who are out there going like, "No, this is my property. What right are you granted, either through the Constitution of the United States, filtered through the 14th Amendment, or through the state constitution, to strip me of my rights and or require me to have permission to do anything?" And yet all of these people who are out there who talk so much about, "Oh, I believe in civil rights, I believe in rights," they all shut up when the state decides it's going to do something.
Yeah, no, I agree.
When
I'll
push
tell
comes
you,
to shove, they'll back right the hell down, because they don't want to bring heat on themselves. And that's why people like you, people like me, the Lisa Hansons of the world, or Larvita McFarquhars, this young man up in Sherburne, you guys, you're all the radicals. You're the weird radicals because you're bucking the system. If you would just comply, everything would be fine for you.
well,
Just
it's
Jay,
so, it's,
if you would have just done what you were supposed to do all those years ago when you started all of this, you wouldn't be in this position. You wouldn't have had to go through all of this.
it's so
That's the
funny.
damn point.
It's so funny you say that, because the Orno mayor, under deposition recently, when pointed out to him that he was violating the constitutional rights of women in this manner, like I just spoke of, said that's our system and that's the way it is. And if you just want to come on board, we'll get along fine. That was literally his answer. You can come to the sunshine if you want to. In other words, if you choose to capitulate, we can get along.
Just, but I don't know why I hang my head down when I think about that. Because we hear this constantly in the justice system at the street level.
Yep.
Just comply. That's all you have to do. Yep. If you don't like what's being done to you, you comply and fight it later.
Yep. And there's no fighting it later.
There is no fighting it later.
No,
because I'm not advocating for people getting into shootouts with law enforcement or code enforcement officers. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you don't stand up for yourself before the process is brought against you, used against you, you will not have a single argument to make in the courts, because you didn't express your discontent. And that was one of the things I was thinking about, is this case, this firearms case about, privately made, privately manufactured firearms, or ghost guns, or whatever terminology you want to use, is the attorney in the defense on this case argued, the Supreme Court said, "Well, you're not arguing this on a Second Amendment grounds, are you?" And he goes, "No, And they're like, well, why aren't you arguing this on a Second Amendment ground? And he said, because it wasn't argued on a Second Amendment ground in the criminal court case. So I can't make the argument now because it was never decided on a criminal or on a Second
Right.
Amendment ground. And
Right.
folks, this is why conversations like what Jay and I are having tonight, and conversations that many of you may or may not have with your friends and your neighbors when you decide to be a stick in the mud. But this is why these things are so damned important, because you have to know, even though they're your rights, and it's the duty of the state to defend your rights from being infringed upon, you have to know your rights to make sure the state isn't infringing on them, because
And
they know better than you.
and they will infringe on them all they want to because they know you don't know shit.
Right.
It's that simple. It's that simple.
You know, we have Chad Catter, who's you guys would have a great conversation sometime. I'm working on getting Chad on the show. Chad does a lot of his own legal work, and he has won so many arguments with cities and counties and the courts. But he asks, ask yourself, if you don't have a right to do something to others, then how do they get rights to do it to you? And that's precisely the argument that we have to be making. And that's why I wanted to have you on, because this is so, to me, this is so important. Like, I'll use this, not that this is the reality. I mean, Jay and I don't know each other from Adam, in the sense of we don't hang out and have beers together or sip bourbon together or whatever.
Not,
That's not
not
the,
yet.
that's not yet, he says. But the point that I'm making is I don't care if you don't like the guy who's doing something. If he's fighting for his rights, if he's fighting for his natural rights, there again, if you want to say God-given or creator granted or whatever, or just natural rights, negative rights, if you know someone, maybe you are like as hardcore, like fundamentalist Baptist as you could get, and you are absolutely adamantly opposed to the LGBTQ lifestyle, but you see a member of the LGBT community being persecuted or prosecuted, not for doing something, inappropriate or like physically aggressive towards somebody, but they're standing on a corner holding a flag, and your town is totally against that, and they drum up or manufacture a reason to silence that person. No matter how much you may disagree with that person or even dislike that person, maybe you've had arguments with that person, you should be the first person standing in line to help that person.
Yep.
But we don't do that anymore, because
No.
it comes down to this pissing match of, I don't like you, and I'm going to use the system that will eventually be used against me against you before you can use it against me.
And that's what I've come to find, is that our judgment has become our society has become way too judgmental. Instead of accepting others, we're set up to judge others.
Right.
And we really need to move beyond that.
And then when you do find something that you really can judge somebody for, everybody tells you you're being judgmental.
Yeah, exactly.
No, like, this person's literally a sleazeball. Like, literally a sleazeball. Well, you're being judgmental. I'm like, you just got done telling me you're judging me. What's you?
Yeah. It's amazing the hypocritical nature of judgmental people. How else do you put it?
Well, I don't even know if amazing is the right word, Jay. I think it's eye-opening is what it is. I think it comes down to how eye-opening a lot of this stuff is. Whether it be, your situation with the driveway and the false malicious persecution of your or prosecution of your better half, right? And I'm just going to say that, I don't use that, but we know she's the better half, right?
Of course.
But whether you, or in this case here with this this veteran who, we send off to go fight this global war on terror and then bring him home. And instead of like saying, hey, neighbor, I know things are hard for you, and I don't know if you've got PTSD, but I know you've got some struggles. How can I help? No, I'm going to bring the power of the city against you because I've decided I don't like you.
Well, and to be honest, that's what's happened to me. I'm a disabled veteran with PTSD. My neighbors all know it. They've done everything they can to trigger me. They've called the cops over and over. They've done every single thing they could to push me over the edge, and I would just never do it. I'm not going to play your game. You know what?
Right.
You know what I am? I'm in it for the good part of what I'm doing. I'm not in it for the
Right.
bad part of what you want me to do.
I tell people all the time, like, in Jay, a little bit of my story and what I, went through and kind of what I've
Yep.
sacrificed to
Yep.
have this show and have this channel. Um, but I tell people all the time, like, if you think I might laugh and joke sometimes or, get a little sarcastic, but if you think I do this merely for the fun of it, or like if you think, and this because you got a channel, you think I'm doing this for the cash, like I've had people go, "You're doing this for the cash." I'm like, no, literally. When I talk about memberships for my channel or super chats, like I appreciate everybody that does it, but I'm not raking in I'm not driving around in a Maserati. Okay, let's
No.
just, you know,
No.
but it's not. I don't do this for me. I don't do this for the entertainment. There are entertaining conversations. I.e. tonight, there are entertaining conversations. And, sometimes conflict can be a little entertaining if it's to a good end, but I'm doing this for other people. I it,
The,
it's
the,
for the
the,
good that it does. And it's the
the,
same thing with you.
yep. The first time I got into social media at all and Facebook was to expose the truth. No other reason. I had to get the truth out there. I was sick and tired of the lies that were being told about me and what was going on in the community. So that's why I did it. And I've gone beyond from just telling the truth to exposing the corruption in my community.
And see, that's the thing. I've told people 1,000 times, and I'm sure you've probably said something close to this with other people. I don't care if you want to start a podcast. I don't care if you want to start a podcast and do exactly what I do. I'd love it. I
Yep.
I would absolutely love it. I want everybody to do what I do. Because if everybody would do what you do, Jay, what I do, what so many of these others do, whether they be First Amendment auditors, and observers, or Second Amendment auditors and observers, or heaven forbid we got to worry about doing Third Amendment auditing. I'm like, or you know, if you find out that they're planning on quartering troops in your home, you let me know. We'll cover that topic.
Yeah.
But um, I want everybody to do this, because if everybody would do what Jay is doing, if everybody do what I'm doing, if everybody would do, what my friend uh, Pat up north does with, going out and holding law enforcement in his area accountable. Like if everybody would make a video about their mayor, like I did about Kim Norton the other day,
Yep.
there would be so much change in the world. There would be
You know,
so much positive change in our local communities, because they'd realize that we can't treat these people like this anymore.
you see, it's all about getting people to think for themselves. Period.
Exactly.
Period.
Exactly.
Yep.
And when you look at it and you make these sacrifices like you've made, obviously, and I mean, I know this has not been cheap for you, and
Yeah.
and
People would be amazed by the number I gave them for dollars it's taken to defend ourselves
right,
against what's gone on for such de minimis activities. And the crazy thing is, they've all acted like we got a meth lab in the house and we're piddling little kids, which is,
right.
and that's how they treat you. And they go after you in that manner.
Oh, it's. I wish I could get people to understand that. He's like, well, what are you doing? Why are you so critical? What are you hiding? And I'm like, that's like one. that's my business if I am hiding something.
Yeah.
but two, like to be suspicious of the state at any of her levels does not make me guilty of a crime. And the fact that they've
Especially,
got people
especially,
convinced.
it
Go ahead.
is, especially when you've been experienced within the state and seen what's gone on.
Right. Exactly. It's like when the settlement was proposed with me in the sheriff's office when they realized that they weren't going to win, and I realized I could never go back to work for the sheriff. Could never go back to that line of work. Because that's what it would have come down to. I'd still be getting paid by them, but eventually I'd win and I'd have to go back to work.
Yeah,
And
with them. Yeah.
which is not an inviting idea with somebody like that who would do what they did to you and then would be pissed off that they lost for doing what they did to you.
Yeah.
Um, the one of the reasons that I took the settlement was that I had, and my mindset has changed on this. I had the mindset that I don't want the taxpayers to have to pay for somebody else's malfeasance. I don't want them to pay for what Sheriff Kevin Torgerson did wrong in treading all over my natural right to freedom of expression and assembly and association. And now I look back and I go, you know what we need? And I think you're going to understand what I mean when I say this. What we need is we need the taxpayers to realize every time one of their servants screws up and infringes on the natural rights of one of their community members or anybody, whether they live in their town or their county or whatever, just anyone, and that person sues and wins, they need to be able to see that in a statement. Your taxes are going to go up by X number of dollars this year because this public servant did something they shouldn't have done, and we had to pay out for it.
Exactly. And here's the
If
problem.
we could get them, if we could get people to say that and get people to stop saying, "Well, I don't want the taxpayers to be on." No, you're on the hook no matter what. But now you know why. And
Well, it goes a little beyond that. It's not just you know why, it's you understand that the people working for you aren't as competent as they portray themselves to be.
and some of it's not even competence. Some of it's just pure maliciousness. Just
It's
because
all
they're protected.
yeah. Oh, yeah. They're absolutely they're golden up there. There ain't nothing they can ever do. I mean, I can't even tell you what's going on up at Orno right now. I mean, we've got a hostile work environment at our public works. I've exposed that. We've got a racist guy who the public works director is afraid of. We've got the city administrator covering for him. I've exposed all of this because I've had 3 confidential informants come forward and tell me this, that this is what's going on in my community. And they still just sit back after everything I've exposed, go, I'll just wait, it'll blow over, don't worry about it. And then we're just supposed to live with these type of people running our communities.
Yeah, and that to me is one of the staggering realities that we live in, is that this is happening in every community.
Yep.
I don't care how big it is or how small it is. This is happening in every community.
Well, hold on. Statistically speaking, it's not happening in everyone. Okay, there's bound to be a few communities that are just fine.
Okay, touche, Jay. There's
got to be something that's good somewhere. Okay, I want to be positive.
It's like somewhere there's got to be some town somewhere. Well, and I'll use this, and we'll get ready to wrap up, and I'll let you kind of give some closing thoughts before I boot you and then do more shilling and grifting for myself. I think of this poor gal down in Texas. She was a city council member, and she wasn't towing the line. And the rest of the city council and the mayor and the city administrator and manager got together and they trumped up charges on her and had her thrown in jail over just something just absolutely malicious, just absolutely made up. And Institute for Justice covered it, and she's winning
Good.
for the malicious prosecution, false imprisonment, and all of that.
Good.
But that's why I don't have as much. I'm not as white pilled as you are on this, because you look and you think that, okay, the small town that's got literally 3 city council members because a town is only 8 people. It just like even
Exactly.
there, even there, and and 2 weeks ago we recognized the anniversary of Killdozer, and
Oh yeah.
and and look at what they painted Marvin Heemeyer out to be, this domestic violent activist, without telling you any of the backstory of what was done to him. Now,
And he was
that doesn't
nothing more.
justify
He was nothing more than one of us who was pushed over the edge by his
in the
local
wrong direction.
government,
Yeah,
who completely disrespected him and his rights.
right. And if you don't want more of those situations, you need to get active.
Yeah.
You have to be the person that gets active to prevent that stuff, because maybe they're not coming for you. But if you find out that they're going after your neighbor's property because your neighbor didn't mow their yard, because your neighbor's 78 years old and can't get out and mow and can't afford to mow his own yard, but they're going to go and foreclose on this person's home for not mowing their yard, maybe get involved. And that doesn't mean just mow his yard. Do that, but also show up at the city hall or the county board or whatever it might be and start demanding changes. Get
Yeah.
involved.
Yeah.
So give us some closing thoughts, Jay, and I'll
Well,
let you get back to your beautiful wife, and then I'll close up.
oh, that's great. This has really been a fun talk, a lot more in depth than I thought it would be. And I really enjoyed the way it went, because we are talking about what happens in most of our communities, where certain people get in charge and you have incompetent staff, and then everything gets rolled over and blown over, and whoever has the money or whoever has a friend or whoever has whatever gets to win. And
Right,
it's sad that in this day and age, people don't understand. And I'm not saying I'm this way, you're this way, whoever, but if you're an asshole, you still have rights. Okay. And we've got to start operating along that dialogue. Now, something I want to bring up quick before we go, believe it or not, in 8, 9, 10 days, I'm heading to Nigeria. I've got a partner there. I'm meeting a
you,
senator, a governor, and the aviation minister.
and a Nigerian prince.
No, senator, governor, and aviation minister. And what they want me to help them with, because Nigeria is lucky to have electricity 10% of the day, whatever
Right.
it is help me build some renewable systems within their community that can
Yep.
deal with their issues. And I'm so heartened that an African community would invite me there to help me spread my knowledge and help them succeed. And I'm so disappointed that my state that I grew up in, that I lived in, that I went to school in, that I graduated in, that I served for, where friends died, can't be bothered to talk to me about the same, and can only denigrate me as being some offcast for trying to enjoy my rights.
Right.
I don't
I
know
mean
how
that.
else to put it.
Right. I mean, I don't know if there's a better way to put it. Land of the free, home of the brave, except for firearms and chickens and turbines. And
Exactly.
that's what it comes down to. And keep me abridged of how everything progresses with you. If you get any more breaking news, let me know. We can bring you back on for
Hold on quick. Just so everybody knows, again, I do have my own YouTube channel, Turbine Guy. Please subscribe. and
Yes.
watch, because I'm going to be updating this whole African trip. It's going to be a great time,
You're
and
going to
I'm
be
going to have
updating from Africa.
oh yeah, I'm going to have a whole series on it. It's going to be
That'll be
wonderful.
awesome.
You are all going to get to go to Africa with me and see how we're going to help Africa succeed where Minnesota wants to stick its head up its ass.
Well, I mean, you just described Minnesota on everything, including its sports team. So, so Jay, I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And people can find you on the website linked in the description of the video if they're interested in wind and solar energy.
Yep, absolutely. You know what? I get free advice to anybody, and anyone needs me set up a system, off we go.
So, yeah, you go enjoy the rest of your night. And I'm going to close up, and then I'm going to feed myself some more.
You too. Thanks. See ya.
Thank you, Jay. Folks, this conversation there again, I say this so often, like seems so far afield of a lot of my other stuff, or maybe far afield of what some of you would um, consider being, the hot topics. I say this all the time, like, folks, I'm not sexy like Flex and the Angry Vet, and I'm not, that's something. It's just not. That's not what I do. I love those guys. I love Flex. I love Tav. I love Long Island Audits. I love all of those channels. I love the Armed Fishermen. Those things are like bread and butter to me. I get my fix on Here's the Deal. Brian from High Impact Flicks. I get my fix on these guys from James Madison Audits, from James Freeman in them. Like I run the board. I even watch Chili once in a while, right? Like I I get it, because that stuff is like meat and potatoes, full of energy. It's in the moment. It's happening. What I bring to the table, and I'm just gonna brag a little bit, is I bring an in-depth perspective on where all of this started and where it's coming from and where it's leading. That's why I fit into this community, if you want to use that terminology, because I grab these strings and I pull them all together. And I'll point to the video that I put out on Friday on my Drive Time Dialectic about the mayor of Rochester and the Rochester Police Department and their risk management attorney contacting a young individual, a young concerned citizen, and basically telling that concerned citizen, look, you should keep your opinions to yourself. And I know that I'm over the target with that video, because I'm pulling all these threads. I'm going, here's this situation, here's this situation, here's this situation, here's this situation. I pull them together, I tie in a knot, and I pull it down, and I keep tying knots. And I put the video up on social media, away from YouTube. I linked it to Facebook, and I linked it to Twitter, and the mayor of Rochester, Minnesota, third largest metro. People, let this sink in. Let this sink in. That video posted to social media, Facebook, the mayor of Rochester, Minnesota, third largest metro area in the state, she came onto my Facebook page and told me to stop spreading misinformation. See, I pull threads. I link things. And all of you can do this. And so when I talk about doing these things, it's not that I'm the only one. Like, folks, I'm not that smart. I'm just not. I'm just observant. I'm not Jay. I'm never going to have an engineering degree. I'm not Chad, Catter, and who's got this 50,000-foot view of things, and he can see things so clearly. And why I'm going to be bringing him on. I know I keep saying this on all these shows, but I am bringing him on. And I mean, I've seen comments in the chat today from guys like Chris and Jugalassis is here. I see so much intelligence in you guys. Like, if I could do this, all of you can do this. In this, whether you're doing it through a podcast or a YouTube channel, whatever the case might be, you guys can do this too. And you should. But one of the other things that you should do is you should head over to Turbine Guy's channel and sub. Juggleassus just subbed. He's my one of my moderators, so he has to do it whatever I tell him to do. But I have to announce as well that Juggleassus just bought his own membership to the channel, so now I guess I have to do what he tells me to do. I think that's how that works. I'm not sure, but you guys could do all of this. You could subscribe to the right channels, and you could pay attention to all these things that are going on. But you can actually be having these conversations. And you could be having these conversations in ways that are impactful that you would never imagine. Across the backyard fence with your neighbor, sitting at the local bar, sipping on a beer or whatever, and having this conversation with the guy at the bar. You'd be surprised the things that people are willing to talk about. Like, we don't have to just in polite company only talk about the weather and sports. And quite honestly, if you live in a state like Minnesota, there's nothing to talk about with sports. And there's only two types of weather: hot and really cold. That's it. That's all we've got. That's so you run out of topics after a while. So if I can do this, you can do this. And if you're the kind of person who does do these things, but you still like to come and watch my channel and you haven't done so yet, subscribe and share my content. Because even though a lot of my stuff does talk about things directly in Minnesota, every single one of these topics that I talk about directly in Minnesota directly links to where you are right now. I guarantee you, if you open your eyes, you will see the things that I'm talking about in Minnesota as they happen in Minnesota happening where you are. I guarantee it. It's unavoidable. I guarantee you it's happening where you are. You know, and Jay, Turbine Guy, he's a little more white-pilled. There's somewhere out there's a town where it's not happening. I can tell you that it's harder to find than you would imagine. I live in a city of 2,600 people. We have lots of problems here. Lots of them. And I've described a couple of them today. So, folks, get involved, stay abreast of these things. Watch the sexy channels. You know, Tav's a sexy beast, man. We love what Tav does. We love what Flex does. We've got a Veterans Affair Media, AVA, a Veterans Affairs Media, who is also a moderator here on the channel. We've got Flying Auditor, well, AVA, like every single one of them does the really cool stuff. The really cool stuff. Feed yourself that, but then come back to me as well and share all of our content together. If that's the only thing that you, and 68 shots, yeah, 68 shots is another good one. All of that stuff is so vitally important. But we can't have just one. You can't have a diet of just that one thing. Like if you wake up every day and the only thing that you're eating every day is nothing but granola, you're going to get sick. I'd like to think that, I offer a balance to your diet and to your intake. And hopefully I bring perspective sometimes on things that you don't see in other places. I think that's what sets me apart a lot of times. Not that there aren't other people out there that do it better, but there are things that I can bring. And sometimes it's just the platform to let incredibly intelligent people like Jay on to talk. So share the content out, like the videos, comment on the videos and afterwards. Helps with the algorithm. A lot of you are really good about doing that now. Getting it out on social media, sharing it on your YouTube channels or in community notes, things like that. That's phenomenal. And it's powerful and it's useful. And, tell people if they like the content and they want to say thanks, they can send me a super thank you afterwards. And in a playback, there's a super thank you option. If you're watching live, you can send super chats. And there's the membership options like Jugalassus just did tonight. So thank you, Jug, for that. I really appreciate that membership. Like I tell people all the time, you guys have no idea how much that means to me. It really literally helps me keep the internet on when the weather's good. It keeps the internet on. It helps pay the electricity bill, ironically. And then go check out my other content. Start at the top of the most recent videos and just play your way down. And if you have something specific you want to ask me about my personal story, feel free to let me know. I will send you the link. You guys can email me at mbrrpodcast@yahoo.com. You can send me a private message on Facebook, Todd Pearson. You'll see my, you'll know it's me. Trust me. You can find me on Twitter @RobeRegiment. And I look forward to hearing from you guys and getting feedback. And I love to find out that you guys are sharing this. And I am once again 100% thankful, 76% thankful to everybody that watches, and very, very thankful to everybody who does the memberships. And I cannot emphasize that enough. So until next time, my friends, my friend Monica, I point this out every time because she went above and beyond. This is amazing. She did this. Fight for your liberty. It is yours. Fight for your freedom. It belongs to you. I love you guys. And until next time, Sic Semper Tyrannis. And, I got to put that up there. Jugs, that means a ton to me. You have no idea how much that means to me to see that. Thank you very much. Once again, till next time, my friends, Sic Semper Tyrannis.
We are go for liftoff in T-30. Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.